The sound of metal crashing against concrete echoed through the massive racing garage just seconds before security guards stormed across the floor. Mechanics froze in place, tools slipped from trembling hands, and every pair of eyes locked onto the man kneeling beside the championship race car with grease covering his worn-out jacket. Above him stood billionaire CEO Vaughn Mercer, furious beyond control, pointing toward the exit as if he wanted the entire world to watch the humiliation unfold. The engine that had failed moments before the biggest race of the season was now roaring back to life because of that quiet single father named Elias Rowan. But instead of thanking him, the CEO fired him in front of everyone. What Vaughn Mercer didn't know was that the man he had just thrown away was the invisible genius who had secretly built every winning race car in the company's history. If you believe kindness and second chances still matter in this world, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Wisdom Story House. Stories like this remind us that the people we overlook are often the ones carrying the greatest burdens and the greatest gifts. Morning sunlight poured through the glass ceiling of Mercer Dynamics Racing headquarters, painting long streaks of gold across the polished floor. The building looked less like a garage and more like a palace built for speed. Engineers in crisp uniforms walked quickly between computer stations while expensive race cars gleamed beneath bright lights like sculptures in a museum. Yet among all the luxury and prestige, Elias Rowan moved almost invisibly through the building every single day. At 38 years old, he looked older than his age. Years of exhaustion had settled beneath his eyes, and the roughness in his hands revealed a lifetime of labor. Most employees barely noticed him because he worked in the lower mechanical division repairing damaged parts, organizing tools, and handling tasks no one else wanted. Every morning before sunrise, Elias woke in a tiny apartment across town where he lived with his 8-year-old daughter Ivy. Their apartment sat above a laundromat beside a noisy intersection where traffic never seemed to stop. The wallpaper peeled from the walls, and rainwater sometimes leaked through the kitchen ceiling during storms. But despite the hardships, Elias always made breakfast for Ivy before school. He braided her hair carefully each morning even though he had learned by watching online tutorials late at night after her mother passed away 3 years earlier from cancer. Ivy never complained about their struggles. She simply smiled at her father with the kind of trust that kept him alive through the darkest days. Elias once had dreams far bigger than survival. Long before tragedy entered his life, he had been one of the most brilliant automotive engineers in underground racing circuits. He designed engines that mechanics whispered about with admiration. Drivers sought him out because his machines felt almost alive on the track. But when hospital bills buried his family in debt and his wife's illness consumed every ounce of time and energy, Elias quietly abandoned his ambitions. Mercer Dynamics eventually hired him for low-level repair work because no one there knew his true history. He never corrected them. Pride did not feed his daughter. That particular morning carried unusual tension inside the headquarters because the company's newest prototype race car was scheduled for a major public unveiling before investors and international media. Vaughn Mercer himself walked through the garage wearing a tailored charcoal suit, followed closely by executives and photographers. At 46 years old, Vaughn possessed the cold confidence of a man who had spent his life believing success came from power alone. His company dominated professional racing, and the media praised him as a visionary genius. Yet behind closed doors, employees feared him more than they respected him. He treated mistakes like unforgivable betrayals and considered compassion a weakness. As cameras flashed around the prototype vehicle, one of the lead engineers activated the ignition system. The crowd waited expectantly for the engine's legendary roar. Instead, smoke burst violently from beneath the hood, followed by a terrible grinding sound that silenced the room. Panic spread instantly across the garage floor. Engineers scrambled toward the car while Vaughn Mercer's face hardened with rage. Millions of dollars and years of reputation sat inside that machine. Elias stood near the back wall organizing spare components when he heard the sound. The noise struck him differently than everyone else because he understood engines the way musicians understand melody. He recognized the problem immediately. A pressure imbalance inside the fuel system was seconds away from completely destroying the motor. Without hesitation, he rushed toward the vehicle despite executives yelling at workers to stay back. Kneeling beside the car, Elias ignored the chaos surrounding him. His hands moved quickly beneath the hood while engineers protested that he had no authorization to touch the prototype. Sweat rolled down his forehead as he disconnected damaged tubing and manually adjusted the fuel synchronization valve using only a basic wrench from his pocket. The garage held its breath. Then suddenly the engine roared back to life with a deep thunderous growl so powerful it vibrated through the entire building. For one brief moment, silence turned into stunned amazement. But Von Mercer did not see a hero kneeling beside his machine. He saw a low-level mechanic violating protocol in front of investors and cameras. His pride could not tolerate the possibility that an unnoticed employee had solved a problem his elite engineers failed to fix. Fury overtook reason. He marched across the floor and publicly accused Elias of interfering with company property. Security guards approached immediately while dozens of employees watched in disbelief. Elias tried to explain the pressure issue calmly, but Vaughn cut him off before he could finish. Without allowing a single defense, he terminated Elias on the spot and ordered security to escort him out of the building. Humiliation burned through Elias as he gathered his worn jacket and toolbox beneath the stares of hundreds of people. Some workers lowered their eyes in shame because they knew the truth. The car only worked because of him. Yet no one dared challenge the CEO. Outside, bright afternoon sunlight felt strangely cold. Elias sat quietly on a bench across the street from the headquarters while traffic rushed by. Inside his pocket rested a folded drawing Ivy had made for him that morning. It showed him standing beside a race car with the words, "My dad fixes everything," written in crooked crayons. His eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. That evening, Ivy noticed immediately that something was wrong. Elias forced a smile while helping her with homework, but children recognize pain better than adults realize. When she finally asked whether he lost his job, he nodded slowly. Instead of fear, Ivy wrapped her small arms around him and whispered that they would be okay because he always found a way. Across the city, Von Mercer sat inside his luxurious penthouse office reviewing reports from the failed unveiling. Investors demanded answers about the engine malfunction. Angry executives pressured him for solutions before the championship race only 3 weeks away. Frustration consumed him until one elderly engineer named Malcolm Pierce quietly entered the office carrying a stack of old blueprints. Malcolm had worked for Mercer Dynamics since its beginning. Age had silvered his hair and slowed his steps, but his mind remained sharp. He placed the blueprints on Vaughn's desk and revealed something shocking. The original championship engines that built Mercer Dynamics into a racing empire had not been designed by Vaughn's celebrated engineering team. They had been created years earlier by a freelance engineer working anonymously through contracted submissions. Every revolutionary design that transformed the company's reputation came from the same hidden signature buried inside technical coding. Elias Rowan. Vaughn stared at the documents in disbelief as Malcolm explained the truth. During the company's struggling early years, Elias had secretly submitted engine concepts through intermediaries while trying to pay for his wife's medical treatments. Mercer Dynamics purchased the designs cheaply without ever meeting the creator. Those designs eventually generated billions in profit and established Vaughn's reputation as an industry genius. Yet the man responsible had remained invisible all along, quietly working downstairs repairing machinery to survive. The realization struck Vaughn harder than any business failure in his life. For the first time in years, guilt entered his heart. The next morning, Vaughn drove personally across the city searching for Elias. Expensive skyscrapers disappeared behind him as he entered poorer neighborhoods lined with aging buildings and crowded streets. When he finally reached the small apartment above the laundromat, he found Elias outside repairing an old bicycle for Ivy under the bright daytime sun. The sight unsettled him deeply. The man he had publicly humiliated still carried himself with quiet dignity despite having every reason to hate the world. Vaughn attempted to apologize, but the words came awkwardly. Men who build empires often forget how to admit they are wrong. Elias listened silently while tightening the bicycle chain. He showed no anger, only exhaustion. Vaughn offered him his job back immediately along with a massive salary increase and executive position. But Elias refused. He explained that losing the job hurt less than the humiliation of being treated like he was worthless in front of hundreds of people. For years he had sacrificed recognition because survival mattered more than pride. Yet watching security drag him away after saving the company reminded him how easily powerful people erase invisible workers. Vaughn stood speechless because every word was true. Days passed as Mercer Dynamics spiraled further into crisis. Engineers failed repeatedly to stabilize the prototype engine before the upcoming championship race. Investors threatened withdrawal. Media outlets published rumors about internal collapse. Meanwhile, Elias focused on finding temporary repair jobs while caring for Ivy. Despite everything, he never spoke bitterly about Vaughn Mercer because bitterness would poison the only peaceful thing remaining in his life, his daughter. Then came the morning of the championship race. Rain clouds gathered heavily over the massive racetrack while thousands of spectators filled the stadium seats. Mercer Dynamics faced potential public humiliation because their prototype car remained unstable. Vaughn stood inside the garage surrounded by anxious executives when he made the most difficult decision of his career. He walked onto the racetrack platform before cameras and journalists and publicly admitted the truth. He confessed that the company's greatest innovations came from a forgotten engineer he had wrongfully dismissed. Reporters erupted with questions while employees stared in shock. Then Vaughn announced he would not allow the race to begin unless Elias Rowan returned willingly to lead the engineering team. Across town, Elias watched the broadcast from a small television inside a repair shop. Ivy sat beside him holding his hand tightly. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his daughter smiled softly and told him that maybe helping people mattered more than proving them wrong. By afternoon, Elias arrived at the racetrack beneath clearing skies. Every mechanic in the garage stepped aside respectfully as he approached the prototype vehicle. No cameras captured the quiet emotion in Vaughn Mercer's eyes when Elias finally nodded and opened the engine compartment. Hours later, the championship race began beneath brilliant daylight. The Mercer Dynamics car moved across the track like lightning unleashed from a storm. Every curve, every acceleration, every impossible maneuver carried Elias Rowan's genius within it. When the vehicle crossed the finish line in first place, the stadium exploded into cheers. But the most important moment came afterward. Instead of standing alone on the victory stage, Vaughn Mercer called Elias and Ivy forward before the entire crowd. In front of millions watching worldwide, he handed Elias the championship trophy and acknowledged him as the true architect behind the company's success. Tears filled Elias's eyes as Ivy hugged his leg proudly. At that moment, applause thundered not for wealth or power, but for a father who endured humiliation, grief, sacrifice, and invisibility without losing his humanity. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Stories like these remind us that kindness can change lives in ways success alone never could. Special request: comment below where you are watching from and tell us about someone in your life who deserves more appreciation than they receive. Years later, people inside Mercer Dynamics still told new employees the story of the quiet mechanic who built an empire without anyone noticing. But the story was never really about race cars or championships. It was about dignity. About unseen sacrifices. About a father who kept moving forward through heartbreak because one little girl believed in him completely. And in the end, that belief became stronger than humiliation, stronger than pride, and stronger than every engine roaring across the track beneath the bright daytime sky.